Night 3, the tennis highlights, the Colonel Sanders, but the low points were reeling that whole bullying thing. It reminded me of the Creed Bratton in The Office.
And how can I be a bully? I'm a sweetie pie. You're a bitch.
Oh, God.
But is Maria the sweetie pie or Sydney? Let's dive into this concept of gaslighting and talk about the drama and pop psych. Welcome to Reality TV Therapy with me, Dr. Diane. Let me start by saying there were some definite highlights. I liked so much of the episode, but it was colored by the negativity and the drama. That's why I've busted out my disgruntled female mug by Bachelorette, because that's kind of how I feel, a bit disgruntled by all of this. Like, why? I don't mind the kissing, I don't mind the fun dates, but it just felt a little bit heavy, and I thought we need to get into it and clarify what these terms actually mean. But let's start with the group date, because I thought this one was actually quite fun. And let's talk a little bit of tea on the ASKN group and have a moment of silence for the A that is now missing. So what you don't know at this point, you see the ASKN women, this has been filmed in the fall, but what's happening lately, which is a little bit of my update, is that the ASKN girls, April, Susan, Kathy, and Nancy, were friends, really good friends, and they were on their way to St. Martin, I believe, going on a tropical trip, but supposedly last minute, April backed out of the trip. I don't know. It sounded like she said she had to work. There were problems with her roof. But then we see the women on their trip and they're like, oh, we miss you, April. But then supposedly they blocked April and then she blocked them back. So I don't think they're on talking terms right now. And the rumor has it that something about money, so that April pulled out of the trip, but she offered to pay her part, and it's just not a good look. And even though you're in your 60s or 70s, gosh knows there can be drama, which is just so disappointing. But my feeling is that here are these women, in particular Susan and Kathy, probably have the means to travel, and maybe April doesn't. And it's just kind of a shame, but sort of what is. So let's get to the group date, though, the pageant part of it. Pageants are hard, except for the Golden Bachelor pageant. I loved the talent show, but here we have like 3 layers, the Sunday kind of laying around. I didn't quite get that. We have a little bit of the talent show and then the asking part, which is the women asking questions of these ladies, which I actually kind of thought I liked the best, that third part about it. But remember, the person who puts in the most effort isn't guaranteed a win. And how can anybody say that one's talent is better or worse than any others? But usually, I'll just say I've watched enough of these Bachelor talent shows, pageants. It's usually the person that does who is uncomfortable, steps out of their comfort zone, and does something directly for the lead that tends to win it. Because otherwise everybody's just doing their own kind of thing. And it's really important, I think, to bring in the lead. Remember Joan, when she brought in, made a little poem, but it was about Gary. And now Lexi does the same thing. She says,
I've learned over the past 30 years of my life that I am the world's best kisser.
Oh, wow.
All right, some people didn't care for that. It was too much. But for me, I thought it was a bold move. And think about it. If you're really nervous and your lip is quivering, then maybe kissing is the perfect thing, because you don't have to sing. You don't have to make a fool of yourself. And it obviously worked for Joey, and not just because of the kiss, but because, again, he felt that Lexi is a very sweet woman. And so I get that. But the other women, this is where they get a little salty, right? It's not fair. We put more effort in, and I think it's really up to the lead to decide. So for Lexi, she made a bold move, and the bold move paid off. Good for Lexi. She won the pageant, got the crown and the sash and the whole thing. How exciting. Now let's get to the negative downer, because none of us are surprised after having seen last week. We knew the drama was brewing, but of course this is news to Joey. And this is really the first conflict he's had to deal with, but it is only week 3. I think Medina is a quiet person. Again, she's a therapist. She's the one who said she was a little bit self-conscious about her age. And of course, lots of people have come out and said, you're not old. We can all echo that. 31 is not old. And she's being careful saying that I didn't call you a bully, but felt bullied. I'm like, Medina, that's a little bit tricky. Now, I think she doesn't want to directly call Maria out. But here's the problem and where it just really went south. Maria does respond poorly to this. She's now been told that she's hurt other people.
Let me just say, like, bully is a big word, okay?
I said I felt bullied. I didn't say you were
Can you
bullied.
just explain to me how you might have felt bullied?
And she gets defensive. That's what happens. The tape is rolling. Remember, these shows are highly edited, but Maria is there really saying, I can't believe this happened. And it's almost like now her reaction is worse than the original thing where she said, hey, lean into your age. You're not old. But this now becomes its own whole story. But I get the feeling in watching this that we don't see the whole thing because I'm sorry, but Sydney's reaction is so strong. I'm like, is there something we can't see here? Because we're seeing one thing and Sydney's responding to something like totally different. But as a therapist myself, I have to respond to this term that it's being thrown around very lightly, the term bullying. What does that actually mean? Well, it means to harm, intimidate, or coerce someone, usually someone who's perceived as being vulnerable. I'm having a hard time with this because is Medina the vulnerable one or is it Sydney? I felt like Medina was just hearing about this and then that was cleared up. Like I keep feeling like it's cleared up, but then it's Sydney who's kind of stoking the fire and saying, Medina's my girl. But then she said somebody else was her girl too. So I'm like, who's your girl? And why does everybody need your help, Sydney? So this is what I'm really having problems with. You let me know how you saw it. But it looks like Sydney is making a big deal. And that's where we could have just kind of landed this plane and been over it. Obviously, Maria's gotten upset. She has kind of like losing it now, but she's standing up for herself. So now we're in the final kind of part of this group date. And Joey doesn't really know what to do with this information. So he gets the information from Medina that she says she feels really uncomfortable. I really appreciated that she said, I don't want to say who it is, but then Joey's not sure what he should really do about this. And here's the thing, what I actually liked about Joey, in the past, we've seen people just blow off and say, I am so confused, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm not going to hand out the group rose. Joey doesn't do that. He actually hands it to Kelsey, which I really like. And I also like, as I said last week, that Joey's not just giving the rose to the same person. You know how one person keeps getting the rose. He's spreading them out. He gave it to Kelsey, which I thought was a really nice pick. So let's go back to the drama now. So now the next day we see in the Bachelor mansion, we see Medina and Maria. And I actually liked this interaction because they're trying to solve it. And Medina reiterates, I didn't call you a bully. In fact, I didn't even say your name. And I think this is where Maria just goes, oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. But again, it looks like these two don't have a big beef, but it gets recycled again and again. And the rest of us are just not having it. Okay. Even Edwina, the other women say that Maria is not a bully. She's straightforward. People appreciate her for that. But this is just too much. Thankfully, we have a one-on-one date that just breaks up this tension because we need to see it. And I loved to see the funny, more playful side of Joey coming out. Like when Jenn says, you have to make eye contact with me when we toast. Otherwise, it's 7 years of bad luck in sex. I haven't heard that part before. I've heard bad luck, right? And Joey just like leans into this and he's funny and they're having a good time together. And I really, really like Jenn. She is fun and vivacious and playful. She came in on the go-kart and I just think she's got great energy. But what a perfect date. They're surfing in Southern California. Joey gets to show off his surfing ability. She's clearly getting pummeled. Let's face it, surfing, if you haven't tried it, it is hard. But I love that they're highlighting Joey's strengths because he can really shine. He is a natural teacher. He's helping her. She's feeling that she's coming out of her comfort zone, and that just makes for a fun, playful date. Now, let's get to the evening portion of the date. Obviously, Jenn has a tough story. She mentions hard relationships for her, but then mainly through her parents and what she had to see. And that they were fighting all the time. She really had to take care of herself. She did call it a traumatic place. And so we sort of see the backdrop of this silly, so to speak, conversation. And then we see real trauma and real difficulties. And so it kind of like, to me, sort of levels those out. But what is hard is that there was no good ending for Jenn and her dad. Not only did she feel unloved, that she really doesn't have any contact with him anymore. This story reminds me a lot of Gabby Windy, when she talked about her mother and how she had to save herself, disassociate from her mother and now has no contact. So I felt that moment, and I felt for Jenn. That's a tough one. Now, Joey, on the other hand, he really handles it well. He says, I'm so sorry. This must be so difficult. And he does himself, right, feel very close to his own father. So he just appreciates what a loss that would be. But again, we come back to the banter where they're outside with the drone show. Lame. I would have preferred real fireworks, but the drone show, we haven't seen this before. And then when it comes up and it says, I have a question to ask, will you marry me? I thought that was really cute. It's like, Jenn, she is just on her toes. They're talking about her being the next Bachelorette, and I'm all for it. We need some Asian representation. There was a whole thing about they tagged Leah on Joan's page or Leah on Jenn's page, and there was some conflict, and that was upsetting to people. But I really think we're ready for it, and she would just be perfect. Let's get to perhaps one of my favorite group dates we've seen, the tennis date. Joey, again, they're highlighting his skills. They're making the lead look good. Finally, Joey on his own is doing a great job, but the edit is actually highlighting him. And, we're taking it a step beyond the tennis memes at the start, and now we're really seeing dates revolving around tennis. I'm looking for, my doubles partner, and I loved that. And then they had some big tennis pros, James Blake, Pam Shriver. I thought this was great, but as we know, the best part were the costumes. I mean, these ladies, obviously, none of them were self-proclaimed good at tennis, but they're giving it their best shot, and they're playing on grass. And if you haven't played on grass before, it's a little bit different than playing on clay courts or regular, what are those? What are they made of? The regular courts. So anyway, the costumes were my favorite part. I have to say, the crybabies, they really leaned into it. We've got Daisy and Autumn are really leaning into the crybabies, full on crying. I would take these costumes over the sexy bikini costumes any day. But it's fun, and nobody's getting hurt or an ambulance is being called. Loved the hot dog and bun, mustard, we do this, muster up. I just loved it. So many cute analogies, the beehive and honey, the lobster, the claws are out, the butter, Kelsey and the butter hat. So much fun. And a few women really shined. Rachel had quite the serve. I really loved that. Joey, as I said in my first episode, when he says, how are we doing? Now this time it's appropriate, right? He's walking back into a group. How we doing? That's perfectly fine because he's talking to a group of women. But Caitlin, she was the one who came with the whole chemistry, and she's the one who is the scientist. She opens up about this family curse. I thought that was a brilliant use of time. And then Joey got to say, look at, you have all these independent women in your family. He's so complimentary, and I think he really makes the women feel special. Gotta love that about Joey. Finally, then, after that, it's Caitlin who gets the group date rose. And interesting enough, again, I like that he's mixing it up. It's not the same person getting the rose time and time again. Mixing it up, love that. All right, now we get to the pool party. Instead of having a cocktail party, it's really appropriate. And boy, they're going in hard. So last time with the Golden Bachelor, there was the whole Amazon gift registry. I don't remember so much obvious product placement. This whole KFC thing, wow. All right, they're getting lots of airtime. Do the women love KFC that much? I don't know. And who wants to eat fried chicken in a bikini and then jump in the pool? I don't know. That wouldn't be my first choice. But they're acting as if they loved that. But we're back to the darn bullying. We can't get away from this. And I'm just ready to be done with it. Now, we all agree Maria didn't handle that so perfectly. She probably could have been a little bit more surprised and handled it and said, I don't want you to feel that way, handled it with a bit more empathy. But now we're going to include Joey and he has to deal with it, right? The lead has no other choice but have to address this head on. If he said, I don't want to hear it, let's all jump in the pool, then they would accuse him of glossing that over. So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now you got to go down this rabbit hole. But here's the thing. You're getting information from two people. I've never seen the lead say, oh, wow, that's an eye-opener. Thank you. It always happens that the stories are very conflicting. In fact, I had the thought, what if a lead ever stopped all of this drama and craziness and said, roll the tape?
I want to see it.
What?
Clearly, you don't want people to see this tape. Now, I don't want people to see this tape either, but you so badly don't want people to see it that it makes me want to see it. Do you see?
Wouldn't it be great? Because you could actually see what happened, not the hearsay, not the telephone, who said what, and change that story so many times. But I do have to agree with Maria. Sydney is talking in generalities, and she's throwing around a lot of therapy lingo. I can't remember all the terms. Was she saying something about toxic, gaslighting, feeling unsafe? These buzzwords. And here's the thing. I'm not suggesting that gaslighting doesn't happen. I'm not suggesting that bullying doesn't happen. But the problem is when we use these words so lightly, it makes it sound like it's happening more frequently than it actually is. And gaslighting in particular is a pretty serious term, usually when a narcissist is telling you that your reality is not such. Okay, which is what, actually, interesting enough, if you go to TikTok and you see that Sydney is doing a video while she's putting on her makeup talking about what gaslighting is. But the comments are like, Sydney, look in the mirror. Maybe that's you. Okay, Maria is speaking her mind. She is telling it like it is. But the first comment, at least, what we saw was not horrible about age isn't a bad thing. Unless, of course, there's just something we haven't seen. But now are we just responding to her reaction to Sydney? And was it really that bad? She was defending herself. Okay. Clearly, Sydney wants Maria gone. She somehow thinks that she's winning, that somehow she has to be the person we saw at the end to have the strength to speak back to Maria because everybody else is so afraid of Maria, which I don't think is true. Okay, and it just doesn't work. The only time this would work is if you recall Teresa, who had that negative interaction with Kathy, but Gary's already in love with Teresa. We find out after the fact, right? And she comes to him and merely just states what happened. Like, just state the facts. Don't give it all these other terms. Don't call it something more than it is. Like calling it gaslighting or calling it, abuse or bullying. Stick to the facts. And Gary could hear that and say, oh, I don't like that. Joey finally admits, yes, I didn't get enough details from Sydney. He just got glossed over. You hear the word and you think, oh crap, there's bullying happening, not on my watch. I've got to stop this. And then you realize that you've got 2 points of view, and what do you do? So what they do is they continue this. Not a fan, but it's part of the franchise. I try not to let this color all the goodness because there were some really good scenes. All those tennis scenes were hysterical. The women, okay, let's go back to the crybabies. When the women say, we're babies, we can't drink champagne anyway because the winners get the champagne. I just thought that was precious. That was precious. Let's get to the rose ceremony. Lexi gets the first rose. Medina, the second one. I think it was second. And then in the end, Maria gets the rose, of course, and so does Sydney. Another time where it's like, even the look on Joey's face, he's like, do I have to give you this rose? The problem is I just don't see a connection there, right? Again, I don't see the connection between Sydney and Joey. So say what you want to about you have to champion and be this person, but it really actually screws it for Maria, because all of us had worried that it screwed it for Teresa, but in this case, I really think it does. That he's going to have stronger connections, and it's really hard to get that out of your head that no, you weren't bullied, that somebody just made up those terms. In the end, we see 3 good women go home. Evelyn, who we knew was going to be very sad about that, she said it herself. Chrissa, who seemed lovely, and I think the third person was Star. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So, my favorite part, and what I want to end this, is with Jesse. Jesse friggin' Daddy Palmer, Colonel Sanders himself, is lying in the big floaty in the pool, and he's talking about, oh my God, this is just the best monologue. He's talking about, why do I even need to say, and the final rose? Isn't it obvious? Hysterical. I've always thought that. Like, he's complaining about the little bit of work that he has to do as the host. But I just thought it was really funny. And now Daddy Jesse is a father. We'll see if he's going to be able to travel. But back then he wasn't. And of course he's, getting on a plane soon and they're off to their next location. But when he said, I'm sorry, kick rocks, adios, show's over, beat it was just the best scene I've ever seen in Bachelor, and I just really love that Jesse is totally leaning into this. Are there any lessons we can learn in this episode? This disgruntled female says the lesson is don't be a bully, but don't use the word bullying unless it's really true. That means that someone has really, chances are, again, these things are not just one time, kind of like gaslighting. It's not just one experience. It's like the experience that they keep making you feel like you are losing your mind. It's the same thing with bullying. It doesn't happen like just one time often. It's usually a pattern. Don't do it. Don't do it. Focus on the positive. There's always going to be people who try to bring you down. And what do you want your partner to think about you? Because that's the whole lens. Whether you think I'm going to go far or get another chance on TV or get more followers. But it's like, would someone really date you then? Is that what you want them to take away? Or do you want to focus on the relationship? You know my answer. And I will see. So that's it. That's my wrap for night 3. See you next time.